The coyote in your neighborhood is not the animal your grandfather shot at. It's bigger. It hunts deer in packs, and roughly a third of its DNA didn't come from a coyote. Biologists have been arguing about what to call it for the better part of 20 years. The honest answer might be that it doesn't have a name yet because the animal isn't finished. America killed its wolves. Every one of them, across the entire eastern half of the country, in a campaign that started in the colonial villages and finished around 1900. Then we walked away and left the chair empty. Something climbed into it, and before we're done, we'll get to a barrier island off the coast of Texas. A man there kept roadkill in his kitchen freezer and accidentally found a species the federal government had already declared extinct. Start with the animal you think you know. The western coyote, Canis latrans, pronounced Canis latrans, is a small dog, 25 to 30 pounds, about the weight of a border collie, with a narrow muzzle and legs built for trotting all day across open country. It eats rabbits, rodents, carrion, fruit, insects, garbage, and whatever the neighbor's cat was doing outside at 2 in the morning. For most of the last 10,000 years, it lived in the western 2/3 of the continent, in deserts and grasslands and sagebrush. It stayed there because something was keeping it there. Wolves. Grey wolves in the north and west, red wolves in the southeast. Big members of the dog family, the canids, do not tolerate small ones. They kill them on sight, and they don't eat them afterward. The wolf war started early. Massachusetts Bay Colony issued the first wolf bounty in North America in 1630, 10 years after the Mayflower. Every colony that followed did the same, then every state, then the federal government, with traps and poison and bounty money and eventually aircraft. By about 1900, the job was finished east of the Mississippi. No wolves in the Appalachians, none in New England, nothing left in the Great Lakes states except a holdout in northern Minnesota. Red wolves hung on in the swamps of the Gulf Coast for another 80 years, and then they were gone too. An ecological opening that size does not sit unused. Today, the coyote lives in every state in the Union except Hawaii. It lives in the Florida Keys, on Long Island, in the Bronx, in downtown Chicago, and about 2,000 miles south of the Rio Grande in Panama City. Since the 1950s, its range has grown by roughly 40%, at least twice the expansion of any other carnivore on this continent over the same stretch of time. It did all of that while Americans were killing something like 500,000 of them a year. Hold on to that number. It comes back later. And it doesn't do what you'd expect. The animals that started showing up in western New York in the 1940s were wrong. Trappers said so immediately. Too heavy, too tall, too dark, with a deeper chest and a skull noticeably wider through the jaw. Everybody assumed somebody's farm dog had gotten loose and gotten friendly. They were half right. The numbers came later. A western coyote weighs 25 to 30 pounds. These eastern animals average 30 to 40, which doesn't sound like a lot on paper and looks like something else entirely when one is standing in your driveway. They're taller, longer in the leg, built through the shoulder in a way no western coyote is. Javier Monzón, then at Stony Brook University in New York, put 437 of these eastern animals through genetic testing. The genome came back at roughly 64% coyote, 13% gray wolf, 13% eastern wolf, and 10% domestic dog. That's a 4-way blend. Every eastern coyote alive is carrying some version of it. The route explains the recipe. Coyotes pushing east had 2 ways around the Great Lakes. The southern road went through Ohio and Pennsylvania, and the animals that took it stayed mostly coyote. The northern road ran through Ontario, and up there in the forests around Algonquin, the coyotes met eastern wolves, Canis lycaon, pronounced Canis lycaon. A wolf that is short of wolves will take what it can get. The coyotes that came back down into New York and New England were carrying wolf inside them. Dog DNA probably arrived earlier for the same reason. A lone coyote on the leading edge of an expansion, hundreds of miles from the nearest female of its own kind, makes a decision in a farmyard at night. None of that would have mattered if the East hadn't changed underneath them. It changed completely. New England farms were abandoned by the tens of thousands through the 1800s and early 1900s, and the forest came back over the stone walls. White-tailed deer, shot down to something like 300,000 animals across the entire continent by 1900, came back with it. Today, the estimate is around 30 million. That's a 100-fold recovery inside a single century, and it laid out a food supply that nothing in the East was eating. A 30-pound animal cannot bring down a 150-pound deer. A 45-pound animal working with 3 others can. Monzón found something that belongs in a movie. The places with the highest deer density had the coyotes with the highest percentage of wolf in their genes. That wolf DNA was being selected for in real time by the amount of venison walking around in the trees. Roland Kayes at North Carolina State put numbers on the hardware in 2010. Eastern coyotes have measurably larger skulls than western ones. The wolf genes appear to have let them take over dense eastern forest faster than a plain coyote could have managed alone. Ontario to the Carolinas in about 75 years. At study sites across the east and southeast, coyote predation is now the leading cause of death for white-tailed deer fawns. At some of those sites, it accounts for the clear majority. Deer hunters in Pennsylvania and South Carolina have been complaining about this for 20 years. They are not imagining it. One crosses in front of your car at dusk on a back road in New Hampshire, and your first thought will not be coyote. You'll think somebody's shepherd got out. It's the wrong size for the picture in your head, and by the time you've worked that out, it's already in the tree line. The voice gives them away even faster than the body does. A group of these animals doing a yip howl at 11 at night sounds like a dozen of them. It's usually 3. The pitch slides, the voices break and stack on top of each other, and the whole mess bounces off the sides of houses. People call the police. What they're hearing is one family telling the next family where the property line sits. Stand in a parking structure on the north side of Chicago at 3 in the morning. You may watch one cross the entrance ramp at a trot, unhurried, not looking at you. It lives there. Stan Gert of Ohio State started the Cook County Coyote Project in 2000, expecting a short study of a marginal animal on the edge of a city. A quarter century later, it's the largest urban coyote study in the world. His team has tagged more than 960 of them and put radio collars on several hundred of those. They found coyotes denning in cemeteries, raising pups on golf courses, and holding downtown territories they defended for years. These animals cross 8-lane roads at night with a success rate that makes human commuters look reckless. Coyotes in Chicago survive better than coyotes in the farm country around it. Of 446 collared animals in one accounting, 14 were ever reported as a nuisance by anybody. The rest simply lived there, invisible, eating rodents and geese and rabbits a few hundred feet from people who had no idea. The urban ones have made adjustments that are hard to read as anything but learning. City coyotes are far more nocturnal than rural coyotes, which is a schedule change, not an instinct. They get better at traffic with experience. In 2006, one turned up in Central Park and led the New York police on a 2-day chase before it was tranquilized. That tells you less about the coyote than about how long it had already been in Manhattan without anyone noticing. Diet is the entire strategy. Rodents, rabbits, fawns, geese, fruit, insects, roadkill, unattended cat food, whatever went into the dumpster behind the taqueria. Nothing on that list requires wilderness. A specialist needs the world to hold still. This animal's specialty is that the world doesn't. Time to come back to that 500,000 a year. In most states, the coyote has no closed season, no bag limit, and no protection of any kind. We shoot them, trap them, gas them in their dens, and hold contests with cash prizes for volume. The federal government alone accounts for close to 70,000 a year, mostly on behalf of the livestock industry. The population keeps climbing. Inside a stable coyote family group, only the dominant pair breeds. The subordinate adults are socially suppressed and they don't reproduce at all. Kill the dominant pair and that suppression evaporates. Litters get larger, more pups survive, young animals disperse into the gaps, outsiders move in. Biologists call it compensatory reproduction. Some estimate you would have to remove around 70% of the coyotes in a region every single year for decades just to hold the numbers flat. America ran the most sustained extermination campaign in its history against this animal and made it bigger. The last 100 years are not where this story actually starts. To understand what the coyote is doing now, you have to go back to a pit of asphalt in the middle of Los Angeles. La Brea has produced coyote bones by the thousands, pulled out of the tar alongside saber-toothed cats, ground sloths, and dire wolves. Those coyotes have their own subspecies name, Canis latrans or kuti, pronounced or cut eye. And the paleontologist John Merriam noticed something about them more than a century ago. They were bigger, heavier through the jaw, deeper in the chest, with teeth built for shearing meat rather than grinding up fruit and beetles. Those coyotes were hunting in the middle of that food chain. The Ice Age ended, the big game died, and within a couple thousand years the coyote shrank. Not gradually. The coyotes from the first stretch of the Holocene, the warm period we're still living in, are the smallest animals in the whole La Brea sequence. Warmth is the obvious explanation. Big bodies hold heat. The world got hotter, so the animal downsized. Julie Meechan and Joshua Samuels tested that in 2012 by checking the control group. Grey wolves lived through the same warming in the same places over the same span, and grey wolf body size didn't move at all. So it wasn't the temperature, it was the neighbors. Dire wolves, Enosion dirus, pronounced no sion dy rus, went extinct, and grey wolves expanded into the space they left behind. Grey wolves kill coyotes. The coyote's answer across the following 10,000 years was to get smaller, quicker, less specialized, and stay out of the way, which means the animal in your yard has been here before. We took the wolf out of the eastern half of North America, and the coyote is doing exactly what it did the last time the pressure came off, getting heavier, getting bolder about large prey, hunting in groups. The difference is that this version is taking 75 years instead of 10,000 because it's borrowing wolf genes instead of waiting on its own mutations. The dire wolf is worth stopping on for a second because almost everybody has it backward. It was not a big grey wolf. In 2021, a team sequenced 5 dire wolf genomes and found the lineage split off from every living wolf-like canid around 5.7 million years ago. It was the New World original. Grey wolves and coyotes both descend from ancestors that walked over from Eurasia much later, and by the geological clock they only got here yesterday. That same study found no evidence that dire wolves ever interbred with grey wolves or coyotes. In a family where everything crossbreeds with everything, that animal couldn't. When its prey disappeared, it had no genetic door to walk through, and it went extinct. Coyotes have that door. They've never stopped walking through it. So, is it a species or isn't it? In 2016, Jonathan Way and William Lin published a paper arguing yes and proposed a name. Canis oriens, pronounced Kai-nis or ens, Eastern Canid. Their case is that the animal sits between its parents in body size and skull shape, is genetically distinct from both, and breeds true. It occupies a niche neither parent occupies consistently across an entire region. They put the name in front of the international canid specialists and waited for the fight. The fight arrived, and most of it came from K's. His objection is specific and hard to argue with. There is no such thing as an animal that is simply coyote plus wolf. The mixture changes as you move. Northeastern animals are 60 to 84% coyote. Coyotes in Virginia carry more dog than wolf. Coyotes in the Deep South come in around 91% coyote with a rounding error of everything else. Some eastern coyotes have essentially no wolf in them whatsoever. There's no clean genetic entity to point at, no boundary anyone could draw, and gene flow with western coyotes never stopped. It's a gradient with no line in it anywhere. Both of these men are right, which is the actual problem. The species definition most of us learned in school, that two things are separate species if they can't produce fertile offspring together, does not function in this family at all. Wolves, coyotes, dogs, and golden jackals can all interbreed and produce fertile young. Every dog you have ever met is classified by most authorities as a subspecies of grey wolf. The line we're trying to draw isn't in the animals. We put it there for our own filing purposes, and the canids never agreed to it. New species formed by hybridization are rare in animals, but they do happen. The Italian sparrow is one, a stable species that came out of house sparrows crossing with Spanish sparrows. The golden-crowned manakin in Brazil is another. In both cases, nobody was standing there watching it happen. We're standing here watching it happen. That's why the answer is ugly. Speciation is a process, and there is no moment inside a process where a bell rings. The strangest version of all this is sitting on a barrier island in Texas. Galveston Island is about 50 miles southeast of Houston, a strip of beach and salt marsh better known for birding than for predators. For years, residents reported canids on the island that looked wrong. Too tall, too long in the leg, too long in the muzzle. Everybody said coyote. Ron Wooten, a Galveston resident and former fisheries biologist, stopped saying coyote after one of them killed his dog. He started photographing them, logging sightings, and cutting tissue samples out of roadkill on the island highway. Those samples sat in his freezer next to the ice cream for years because he didn't know who would want them. In 2018, Bridget Von Holt at Princeton and Kristin Bresky at Michigan Tech tested them. About 30% of the genome of the Galveston animals traced back to red wolves, Canis rufus, pronounced K-nis ro fus. Some of the red wolf variation inside them doesn't exist anywhere in the captive red wolf population. The red wolf is the most endangered canid on the planet. It was declared extinct in the wild in 1980. Every living red wolf descends from 14 animals pulled out of coastal Texas and Louisiana in that final roundup. The reintroduced population in 5 counties of eastern North Carolina peaked around 120. Gunshots and vehicle strikes drove it down into the single digits by about 2020. It's back to somewhere near 2 or 3 dozen. That is the entire wild population of the species anywhere on Earth, and a piece of what we lost has been sitting in a Texas beach town the whole time, riding inside coyotes. Before the last red wolves were captured, some of them bred with the coyotes moving into their territory. A later survey turned up 2 dozen animals on Galveston and 8 more on the mainland, carrying more than 10% red wolf ancestry. Texas has put wildlife crossing signs on the island highway for them. People call them ghost wolves. Run that backward, and you get the uncomfortable version of this entire story. There's a live scientific argument, contested and unresolved, that the red wolf itself came out of exactly this process. Coyotes and gray wolves mixing across the American Southeast a very long time ago. A 2019 review by the National Academies came down firmly on the side of the red wolf being a legitimate, distinct animal worth protecting under federal law. The question of how it got here has never been fully closed. If that's what happened, the eastern coyote is a rerun, and we already decided in law and in funding and in 14 founding animals that the product of the last one was worth saving. The current run isn't finished. Coyotes crossed the Panama Canal in 2010. They've since worked their way to the edge of the Darien Gap, pronounced Darien, the wall of forest between Panama and Colombia. Camera traps have picked up individual animals inside Darien National Park. In one 3-year stretch after 2015, they pushed 120 miles, faster than their average pace back home. Kays has said he wouldn't be surprised if they end up colonizing all of South America, a continent no coyote has ever set foot on. There are jaguars in there. That's the only thing that has slowed them down. Up north, meanwhile, in the deep deer country of Maine and the Adirondacks and southern Quebec, the animals keep trending heavier and more wolf-like. 55-pound individuals turn up. Pack structure tightens. Whether anyone ever writes Canis oriens into the official books is a question about committees and paperwork. The animal is not waiting on the paperwork. We think of new species as something that happened, past tense, somewhere with no roads, viewed through glass in a museum room that smells like floor polish with a placard and a date next to it. This one is happening at highway speed, on our schedule, in our subdivisions. It feeds on our garbage, our deer, and the hole we punched in our own ecosystem when we decided a continent would be better off without wolves. It's been going for about 3 human lifetimes. It hasn't stopped. And you can watch the whole thing in the animal that trots past a grocery store loading dock at 4 in the morning. It's gone before the security camera finishes focusing. America tried to erase a predator from half a continent. America succeeded. Every wolf east of the Mississippi, gone after 300 years of steady work. The space we cleared didn't stay empty because empty space never does. It filled from underneath with a smaller animal that took what it needed from the thing we destroyed and walked into the opening wearing its genes. You don't get to remove a predator. You only get to choose which one shows up next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.